We're all Africans. There's no racism here. That's just a Western idea to divide us. They look at you like you're less than human, like you're a slave. The history of this region is written in black and white, but we've only been taught how to read one. So, what's the real story? Do North Africans actually look down on black Africans? It feels like a simple question, but it's impossibly loaded. I'd heard the angry denials, and I'd heard the painful accusations. I had to see it for myself. So I went on a journey across Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt. I wanted to understand the deep-seated, often unspoken tensions between North Africans and their sub-Saharan neighbors. And what I found was a complex mess of historical prejudice, modern-day discrimination, and a new generation fighting to break the silence. This story is so much more complicated than I ever imagined. To get a grip on the present, you have to dig through the past. And in North Africa, the past is a battlefield. Before Arab armies showed up in the 7th century, this land was home to a whole tapestry of indigenous people. Ancient Egyptian records and Roman historians talk about a landscape filled with diverse groups, including the Amazigh or Berbers, alongside other black African populations like the Nubians. The Roman historian Procopius, writing in the 6th century, even distinguished the invading Vandals from the local Moors by noting the Moors were black-skinned. This was a profoundly African place, but history is written by the victors. The Arab conquest of North Africa didn't just reshape its identity and culture. It reshaped its social hierarchy. And with it came the expansion of one of the longest, most brutal chapters in human history, the trans-Saharan slave trade. For more than 1,000 years, from around the 8th century all the way to the early 20th. A devastating trade in human beings flowed north across the desert. Vast networks controlled by Arab and Berber traders were used to capture and transport millions of people from sub-Saharan Africa. These weren't just routes for gold and salt. They were arteries of human suffering. People were marched in caravans across searing heat, sold and resold in markets in cities like Sejilmassa, Tunis, and Cairo. One prominent historian, Paul Lovejoy, estimates that around 6 million black people were enslaved and transported across the Sahara, and that's just between the years 650 and 1500. Unlike the transatlantic slave trade, which was mostly about male labor for plantations, the trans-Saharan trade had a huge demand for women and children, forced into domestic servitude and concubinage. Many men were turned into soldiers. The 17th century Moroccan Sultan Moulay Ismail, whose own mother is said by some to have been an enslaved woman, famously built entire armies out of black slaves. And this history isn't just some footnote. It forged a deep, lasting connection in the collective mind between blackness and servitude. The Arabic word for slave, abd, became a casual slur for a black person in many places, linguistic scar that's still there today. All of this history created a culture of silence where racism was almost never talked about openly. It wasn't until the Arab Spring in the early 2010s that the silence started to crack, as a new generation of activists began to publicly challenge the unspoken hierarchies that have defined their societies for centuries. This history is the ghost in the room. And to see how that ghost shows up today, you have to walk the streets. My first stop, Morocco, Casablanca. The name alone sounds like a crossroads of cultures. And Morocco really leans into its role as a gateway to Africa, a leader on the continent. In the last few years, King Mohammed VI has pushed a pro-migrant policy, even landing a role in the African Union to lead on migration issues. The country has given legal status to tens of thousands of sub-Saharan migrants, which is a big contrast to some of its neighbors. On the surface, it looks like a model for integration. But when you talk to people, the picture gets blurry. In the busy streets, I met students and workers from Senegal, Nigeria, and Guinea. Some, like a young guy I talked to who'd been in Morocco for 4 months, told me he hadn't had any bad experiences. No racism. He was just hopeful and focused on his goals. But that wasn't everyone's story. Go deeper into Casablanca's hidden African migrant communities, and you hear a totally different narrative. It's a world of lively West African markets and shared meals, but it's also a world of fear. Fear of being profiled, fear of getting sent home, fear of just being seen. One man told me, with total resignation in his eyes, "We are here today like slaves." The blacks are like slaves in Morocco. He told me he was brutally beaten with a baseball bat for his cell phone. This wasn't some one-off incident. Human rights groups and migrants themselves have documented widespread abuse. The verbal insults are constant, being called Kurd monkey or the ever-present ABD slave. Physical attacks, while not as common, can be extreme. A Malian student savagely beaten on his university campus. A Liberian student stabbed in the stomach. There's this pervasive social belief that blames black migrants for everything: taking jobs, crime, disease. A lot of Moroccans I talked to denied this prejudice, insisting on a shared African identity. But sometimes, in the same breath, they'd use language that revealed their own unconscious bias. Social media can be a cesspool of intolerance, aimed not just at migrants, but at black Moroccans, too many of whom are descendants of the very people brought across the Sahara centuries ago. Morocco's official policy of welcome and the on-the-ground reality for its black population are in a state of constant tension. It's both a haven and a hostile environment, a place of opportunity and a place of peril. It's a country trying to look south while so many of its people still look down. From Morocco, I headed to Tunisia, a country where the quiet, simmering tensions I saw in Morocco have recently exploded into an open political firestorm. For years, activists have been fighting to get racism on the national agenda. The Arab Spring in 2011 cracked open a window, letting anti-racism organizations finally form and challenge the government's denial of the problem. But in 2023, the conversation took a sharp, dangerous turn. The Tunisian President Kais Saied said in a meeting that hordes of irregular migrants from sub-Saharan Africa were bringing violence, crimes, and unacceptable practices. He didn't stop there. He claimed there was a criminal arrangement to alter the demographic structure of Tunisia, with the goal of turning it into a purely African country that has no affiliation to the Arab and Islamic nations. That language is a direct echo of the white nationalist Great Replacement theory, and he was even praised by far-right politicians in Europe for it. The impact on the ground was immediate and devastating. The African Union condemned his words as shocking and racialized hate speech. But in Tunisia, the president's speech was seen as a green light for abuse. Vigilante groups started forming. Sub-Saharan Afrikaans. Many black Tunisians, mistaken for them, were attacked in the streets, kicked out of their homes, and blocked from public transportation. Hundreds were rounded up and deported, with some allegedly just left in the desert on the border with Libya. I spoke with black Tunisians who felt totally betrayed. One activist told me the president's comments just gave voice to the most primitive, racist tropes that were always bubbling just under the surface. For them, this wasn't just about migrants. It was an attack on their own identity as black citizens of an Arab nation. The government basically created an imaginary enemy, as one rights activist put it, to distract from the country's massive economic and political crises. But for black people in Tunisia, the enemy now felt very real. The open hostility was terrifying and new, but it was built on a foundation of discrimination that had been there all along. The fight for equality, which had made so much progress, suddenly became a fight for basic safety. My last stop was Egypt, a nation that perfectly captures the identity crisis of the whole region. Is Egypt African? Is it Arab? Or is it just ... Egyptian? For centuries, the country's ruling class was often made up of lighter-skinned elites of Turkish Circassian or European descent. This helped cement a social hierarchy where light skin was linked with power. Today, Egypt officially embraces its role in the African Union, but a lot of Egyptians I talked to were quick to separate themselves from an African identity, preferring to call themselves Arab. This denial has a real impact on the country's black population, which includes the large Nubian community in the south and millions of migrants and refugees from places like Sudan, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. In Cairo, I found that racism is both casual and systemic. Racial slurs are common on the street. Black people I interviewed shared awful stories of daily discrimination. One American teacher told me about being called racist names and said she would never recommend Egypt to any black person. Another teacher was given whitening cream as a gift from a student's mom, who told her flat out that being white is better. For the millions of migrants who fled war and poverty, the situation is especially bad. They're often pushed into the informal economy, working construction or as domestic help, where they face constant abuse with almost no legal protection. Aid workers told me that sub-Saharan refugees are treated with a different set of unwritten rules than Arab refugees, facing more obstacles in school, business, and legal issues. And yet, there's this deep denial that racism is even a problem. One government official told Al Jazeera flatly, "There is no racism in Egypt, but that's completely contradicted by the daily lives of millions." In Egyptian media, black characters have historically been portrayed as servants, doormen, or cleaners, reinforcing old stereotypes. Even famous black Egyptians, like the football star Shikabala, have been targeted with horrific racist abuse from crowds during games. Egypt, this ancient civilization on the Nile, a cornerstone of African history, seems to be a country at war with its own geography and its own people. It's a place where being African is both a source of historical pride and a reason for modern-day prejudice. But this story isn't just about prejudice and pain. Across North Africa, a courageous new generation is rising up. They're activists, artists, and academics who are refusing to stay silent. The Arab Spring might not have brought the democracy everyone hoped for, but it did shatter the culture of fear. It opened up space for conversations that used to be impossible. In Tunisia, this is where you find hope. Activists like Sadia Maspa, who founded the anti-racism organization MEMT, have been on the front lines for years. Before the revolution, she was denied a permit because she dared to suggest racism even existed. After, her organization became a pillar of civil society. Along with other groups, they have forced the issue of racial discrimination into the national debate, even managing to get a landmark law passed in 2018 that criminalizes racial discrimination. These movements are often led by powerful Black Tunisian women who highlight how racism and sexism intersect. They organize protests, run campaigns, and build solidarity with global movements like Black Lives Matter. In Morocco, you can hear this new consciousness in the music. Music is now a global phenomenon, celebrated at a huge annual festival in Essaouira. But its roots are in the suffering of enslaved West Africans brought to Morocco. The name Nawa itself probably comes from Guinea, and it was once a term for Black people. The music was their oral history, their spiritual practice, an antidote to the misery of slavery. The metal castanets, the krakubs, are said to represent the sound of their ancestors' shackles. For centuries, this was the music of a marginalized community. Today, seeing it celebrated as a national art form is a powerful act of recognition, reclaiming a history that was hidden in plain sight. Across the region, a network is forming. They are connecting local struggles to a global fight for racial justice, using social media and research to tear down old narratives. They're arguing that being North African and being Black are not mutually exclusive. They are demanding a future where their Africanness is not a source of shame, but a point of pride and connection. This movement is still young, and it's up against enormous challenges, but it represents a fundamental shift. It's the sound of a new generation claiming their full identity, demanding that their nations finally live up to the promise of a truly united Africa. So, where does that leave us? After this whole journey, what's the final answer? Do North Africans really look down on Black Africans? The truth is, there's no easy yes or no. The reality I found is fractured, a landscape of deep, painful contradictions. Yes, there is a clear and undeniable prejudice. It's a social hierarchy born from the ashes of the trans-Saharan slave trade that continues to poison interactions and institutions today. I saw it in the fear in a migrant's eyes in Casablanca. I heard it in the hateful rhetoric of a president in Tunis. And I felt it in the quiet dignity of those fighting for their identity in Cairo. The legacy of slavery isn't in the past. It is a living, breathing wound. But that's not the only truth. I also found a region in the middle of a profound and often painful awakening. I met people who are pushing back, celebrating their African heritage, and building bridges of solidarity. I heard the defiant rhythm of Nawa music reclaiming its history and saw the unwavering courage of activists demanding justice. This isn't a monolithic culture of hate. It's a society at war with itself, where a deep-rooted prejudice is being met with a powerful and growing movement for change. The real question isn't just about prejudice. It's about identity. What does it mean to be North African? What does it mean to be Arab? And what does it mean to be African? The struggle over these questions will define the future of this region. It's a struggle between the lingering ghosts of a Slavening past and the vibrant dreams of an integrated Pan-African future. The silence has been broken, and the conversation, no matter how difficult, has finally begun. This is just one story in a much bigger conversation. What are your experiences? What have you seen or heard? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. And if you believe these stories can help foster understanding, please share this video and subscribe for more journeys into the complex cultures that shape our world.